For tuning into 660 on that AM dial. That quote comes from King Falls AM, a podcast that imitates a radio show in a small town where everything's not as it seems. There are many fictional radio shows in the world of podcasting, like Welcome to Night Vale and The Black Tapes, but these fictional radio shows are not the only place where the news can get a bit wild. Radio's history has been riddled with hoaxes, and today I'll be describing 3 of them to you. We'll start off by tuning into Orson Welles' infamous broadcast War of the Worlds. Stay tuned to hear about I Libertine, the best-selling book that didn't exist. And finally, we'll cut to commercial to learn about the Plymouth Mall ad campaign. So don't touch that dial. Let me set the scene for you listeners. The date is October 30th of 1938. You turn on the radio to listen to some classical music, when suddenly it's interrupted by a news bulletin about an alien invasion in progress. You'd be terrified, and rightfully so. But if you tuned in just a few minutes earlier, you would have heard that was actually the Mercury Theater on the air, performing a live adaptation by Orson Welles of the classic piece of literature, War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. No relation. Orson Welles wanted to bring realism to this broadcast, so he made it in a series of news bulletins. According to the video, the broadcast that terrified a nation, hosted by Inside a Mind, Orson Welles instructed the lead actor, playing the reporter, to use the Hindenburg disaster as inspiration when delivering his lines, to give it an even thicker layer of realism. Unfortunately, Orson Welles' plan worked a little bit too well, when the next day the newspapers were full of reports of mobs in the streets, people leaping off of buildings, and general mass panic. However, this mass panic this broadcast is so well known for today may not have been as massive as we've been led to believe. According to a survey done by C.E. Cooper the night of the broadcast, a measly 2% of listeners were even tuned into the Mercury Theater on the air that night. That doesn't account for anyone who might have left their homes in fear of aliens, but it's estimated that less than 50 people did that. So why did the papers lie? Well, they wanted the general public to stop trusting the radio as a source of news and return to the newspaper. And if readers, come advertisers. So in the end, it's all about the money. Turns out, when we look back on it, this hoax is a lot more fake than we might once have first. Let's move on to our next segment about I Libertine, the best-selling book that didn't exist. According to the University of Tulsa, this hoax started in April of 1955. New York radio DJ Jean Shepherd was fed up with people pretending to be scholars by following whatever the latest fad was based on the New York Times best-selling list or the other famous lists of the time. With the help of his dedicated fans, which according to Hoax.org he referred to as the Night People, they came up with a plan to smoke out the phonies. They created a fake book titled I Libertine by Frederick R. Ewing, and Jean Shepherd instructed the Night People to go out to their local bookstores and ask about the book. The thought was, if enough people started talking about it, those not in on the plot would think that was real, and to pretend to have read it as well, just to fit in. This plan worked surprisingly well, and I Libertine eventually made it onto the New York Times best-selling list, despite not having existed, because it was just so popular in demand at the bookstores. Many absurd stories came about because of this book, one of which came from a college student who, for his English class, wrote an essay titled F.R. Ewing, an Eclectic Historian, where he not only quoted the fake book, but also BBC interviews with the author, and received a B+, and a note saying he'd done superb research. He later told Shepherd that he was afraid that his whole education might be phony. Everyone from professors to bridge players fell for this hoax, until 16 months later, when a reporter approached Shepherd about breaking the story. And the next day, on August 1st of 1956, the Wall Street Journal headlines were all about I Libertine and how the Night People had tricked everyone into thinking that it really existed. After so much discussion was brought up about this book, a publishing company approached Shepherd about making it a reality. And according to the video, this best-selling novel was a total hoax, posted by Austin McConnell. Shepherd said yes, but he made sure that all the proceeds went to charity. Thank you for staying tuned this far into our podcast, listeners, but it's time to cut to commercial and learn about the Plymouth Mall ad campaign. Unlike the other 2 hoaxes I've talked about so far, this one was not a nationwide phenomenon, but that did not stop it from having an important impact. According to the article in the Cincinnati The Inquirer titled Ads for Fake Plymouth Mall Cause Controversial Laughter by Jeff Sussex, this hoax started in the fall of 1984. When a large supermarket came into town and spent a lot of advertising money in the newspapers and on TV, and absolutely none in the radio. This really frustrated the president of the Greater Cincinnati's Broadcaster Association, so he asked Jerry Galvin to come up with a plan to advertise for the radio. Galvin then asked his friend Jay Gilbert to assist him in this quest, and they came up with a plan to make a fake product to advertise on the radio to show how effective advertisements could be. According to the article, Remembering Fake News is Fun by Jay Gilbert, one of the creators of this hoax that was posted in the Cincinnati Magazine in 2018, their first idea had to be scrapped, but they went back to the drawing board and came up with Pullett Mall, the first vertically underground mall. To quote the end of every single advertisement, the best value in town is a hole in the ground, coming to Greater Cincinnati soon. These vague advertisements went out on 17 different local stations in January of the next year, and many people fell for them, including Galvin's own mother. After 3 weeks of letting this hoax go on, they decided to bring it to a close by saying that the recent cold activity they'd been experiencing had led to seismic shifts that had moved their dig site from somewhere in between Cincinnati, Ohio, and Lincoln, Nebraska. About a week after that explanation, they came properly clean and received a lot of backlash, saying that what they had done was underhanded and possibly even illegal. Yes, it was misleading that they didn't explain who they were actually advertising for, but according to the Burke Marketing Research Company survey conducted on this ad, it was 60% effective, which is incredibly impressive when you know that the norm is 10% effectiveness. Sometimes, crime really does pay. Thank you for joining us today, listeners. We covered Orson Welles' infamous broadcast of War of the Worlds that the papers greatly exaggerated. Gene Shepard's plot to use Isla Routine to smoke out the phonies with the help of his night people, and Pullett Mall advertising campaign that swept Cincinnati by storm. Fake news is a lot older than you might have once thought. So the next time you turn on the radio or turn into a podcast, make sure that you don't believe everything